The courtroom was eerily quiet as 5-year-old Emily Carter walked through the heavy wooden doors, her small hand gripping the leash of Rex, a German shepherd bearing a jagged scar down his side. Every eye in the room followed the little girl as she made her way to the witness stand, her steps slow, tentative, yet resolute. Judge Mark Sullivan, a man seasoned by years of courtroom battles, leaned forward, his sharp gaze fixed on the child. He understood the gravity of the moment. The entire case rested on her fragile shoulders. Emily was the lone witness to an attempted abduction, a case that could see a dangerous man locked away for life. But there was one complication. Emily had not spoken a word since the attack. Across the courtroom, Richard Hale sat at the defense table, his face calm, almost smug. At 45, the unremarkable software engineer had been arrested after an eyewitness had placed him at the scene of Emily's abduction attempt. But his defense was airtight, no physical evidence, no confession, and a traumatized child who couldn't speak. His lawyer had already laid out a strategy designed to dismantle the credibility of the young girl's testimony. But then, something unexpected happened. As Emily settled into the witness chair, her green eyes locked onto Richard Hale's. Her tiny fingers twitched, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't paying close attention. It was a signal, one she had learned through weeks of therapy. Only two beings in that room noticed it, Rex and Judge Sullivan. Rex's response was instantaneous. The moment Emily's fingers moved, a silent plea for help, the dog's body stiffened. His ears shot forward, his muscles taut like a coiled spring. A low, rumbling growl rose from his chest, a sound heavy with warning and recognition. His golden brown eyes never wavered from Hale, pinning him in place with a gaze that could freeze blood. The courtroom buzzed with unease, whispers rippling through the crowd. There was something primal in the dog's reaction. This wasn't just the response of a well-trained service animal, it was something deeper. Judge Sullivan's gavel slammed down with a sharp crack, the sound echoing like thunder in the silence. "This court will take a 15-minute recess," he ordered, his voice unusually urgent. The prosecutor, Jenna Collins, gave him a questioning look, but Sullivan didn't meet her gaze. Instead, his eyes flicked to Emily, who clung tightly to Rex, as though he were her lifeline. Something significant had just transpired, and he needed to understand it before the trial could continue. As the courtroom emptied, Sullivan stayed seated, his mind racing. He had witnessed countless cases, but never had he seen a therapy dog respond with such certainty. What had Rex recognized? More importantly, what did it mean for the case? Outside the courtroom, Emily knelt beside Rex, clutching his fur as if she were holding on to her very sanity. Her mother, Sarah Carter, knelt beside her, brushing the girl's curly hair back with trembling hands. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" she whispered. Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her grip on Rex tightened, her small body pressing into his side. Jack Monroe, the lead investigator on the case, observed from a distance. The seasoned FBI agent had an instinct honed over decades of work, and right now, his instincts screamed that whatever had just occurred in the courtroom was a game changer. He stepped closer to Judge Sullivan. "Something spooked that dog," he muttered under his breath. "I'd bet my badge he recognizes Hale from somewhere." Sullivan exhaled slowly, his sharp blue eyes narrowing. "Then we need to find out where." Meanwhile, in the defense's private room, Richard Hale sat across from his lawyer, Michael Graves. The moment they were alone, the smug expression that had settled on Hale's face twisted into something colder. His fingers drummed against the table, replaying the moment in his mind. The girl hadn't spoken, but the dog had reacted. "She knows," he muttered under his breath. Graves raised an eyebrow. "What?" Hale forced a small smile. "Nothing," he replied. But inside, his thoughts were already racing. That damn dog. He hadn't considered it might be a problem, but now he realized Rex could be the key to everything unraveling. As the recess neared its end, Judge Sullivan straightened, preparing himself to return to the trial. He didn't believe in coincidences. Something had just happened in that courtroom. Something significant. Rex had given them a clue, perhaps the most important one yet. It was time to dig deeper, and for the first time since the trial began, Sullivan felt the tide shifting. Before the courtroom, before the terror that had stolen her voice, Emily Carter had been an exuberant child. At 5, she was the kind of girl who filled a room with laughter and stories, her bright blue eyes sparkling with curiosity. She adored fairy tales, stuffed animals, and the way her mother read bedtime stories, mimicking voices for each character. She had never known fear until that one fateful afternoon. It was a perfect spring day, the kind where the scent of flowers hung in the air and the sun bathed the world in warmth. Sarah Carter had been watching her daughter from the kitchen window, a soft smile tugging at her lips as Emily twirled in the yard, her pink dress swirling like a dancer's skirt. David Carter was expected home soon, and Sarah was debating whether to start dinner or wait. It should have been an ordinary afternoon, a safe afternoon. At 3:42 p.m., Sarah's phone rang. It was her sister calling from out of state, and Sarah stepped inside to take the call, thinking it would only last a moment, 4 minutes. That was all it took. When she stepped back outside, the gate was ajar. A chill of panic gripped her chest as she scanned the yard. Emily was still there, but she wasn't alone. A black van sat idling at the curb, its side door slightly open. A man knelt beside Emily, his smile disarmingly warm. "I have puppies in my van," he said, his voice smooth and rehearsed. "Special ones. They need a little girl to take care of them. Would you like to see?" Sarah's world froze, instinct screaming louder than her thoughts. Her voice cut through the air. "Emily!" The man's head jerked up, his smile vanishing, replaced by something darker, calculating. Without warning, he grabbed Emily's arm. She froze. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She only stared at him with wide, unblinking eyes, as if an ancient terror had locked her in place. Across the street, Martha Jenkins, a retired nurse walking her terrier, witnessed the whole scene unfold. Her voice rang out, aged but strong. "Hey, get away from that child." The man hesitated, his grip loosening for the briefest of seconds. That was enough. Emily yanked her arm free and bolted toward her mother. Sarah scooped her daughter into her arms just as the van's engine roared to life. The tires screeched as the vehicle sped off, leaving a black trail on the pavement. Sarah held her daughter tight, her heart pounding in her chest. But Emily didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply buried her face into her mother's shoulder and trembled. The police were on the scene within minutes. Detective Jack Monroe, a seasoned investigator from the FBI's Child Abduction Task Force, took command immediately. His graying hair and sharp brown eyes told the story of years spent chasing shadows, hunting down missing children. Some never found, others saved just in time. He'd seen this pattern before, far too many times. "He fits the profile," Monroe muttered under his breath, flipping through the pages of a worn notebook. 4 children have disappeared in the last 18 months, all lured near their homes, all promised puppies. His partner, Agent Lisa Grant, crouched beside Emily, her voice soft but insistent. "Sweetheart, can you remember what the man looked like?" Silence. Sarah gently brushed Emily's hair back, her hands trembling with quiet desperation. "Honey, it's okay. You're safe now. Can you tell the nice officer what he looked like?" Emily's tiny hands clutched her mother's sweater, but she didn't speak. She didn't nod. She didn't even shake her head. It was as though her voice had been switched off, as if some invisible force had sealed it away completely. "She hasn't said a word since I picked her up," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking with barely contained fear. "She just won't talk." Agent Grant exchanged a glance with Monroe, her face tight with understanding. "Selective mutism," she murmured. "A trauma response." Monroe sighed deeply, rubbing his temple as if trying to shake the weight of the situation off. "Without a statement, we don't have much to go on. The description is vague. A man, a black van. Could be anyone." Martha Jenkins, the retired nurse who had witnessed the attempted abduction, stepped forward, her voice firm with certainty. "I got part of the license plate," she said, her eyes sharp. "The first 3 letters, YKZ." Monroe's head snapped to her, his attention locked onto the new lead. "That's something." Sarah, still holding Emily close, felt a wave of helplessness crash over her. Her daughter, once a lively, talkative little girl, was now a shadow of her former self, and as the days went by, it only grew worse. Emily stopped playing. She stopped drawing. She refused to leave the house, flinching every time a car drove by. She barely slept, and when she did, her nights were filled with silent, unseen nightmares. Her small body would twist and jerk in terror, but not a single scream passed her lips. Only gasps of fear that would wake her parents in the dead of night. Sarah and David tried everything: story time, her favorite foods, even her beloved stuffed bunny. But nothing worked. The child they knew was slipping farther away, and neither of them knew how to bring her back. One evening, Sarah sat across from David at the kitchen table, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "The therapist recommended a support animal," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "A therapy dog." David ran a weary hand through his hair, the lines of exhaustion evident in his face. "You really think that'll help?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her voice tight with uncertainty. "But I'm willing to try anything." Neither of them could have known just how much that decision would change their lives. Because while Emily had lost her voice, there was one who could still hear her. His name was Rex. The air inside Dr. Laura Bennett's Animal Rehabilitation Center was thick with the sterile scent of antiseptic and the earthy musk of animal fur. The room was quiet except for the ticking of a clock and the occasional scratch of claws against the tiled floor. On a large orthopedic bed near the window, a German shepherd lay still, his deep brown eyes following every movement with a quiet intensity. His name was Rex. Once, he had been one of the finest canine officers in the city's police force, a dog whose instincts and training had saved lives. But now, his body bore the scars of a sacrifice made in the line of duty. A jagged mark ran down his right flank, a permanent reminder of the night that had ended his career. During a raid to rescue a kidnapped child, Rex had lunged at an armed suspect without hesitation. The man had slashed at him with a knife meant for an officer, cutting deep into Rex's flesh. Despite the injury, the dog had subdued the suspect, even as his blood darkened his fur. In the months that followed, Rex's injury never fully healed. His mobility was compromised, and the department, already stretched thin, made the difficult decision to retire him. He had been placed on the euthanasia list, deemed unfit for service. That was when Laura Bennett stepped in. Dr. Bennett had been running a therapy animal program for years, specializing in cases where animals could help trauma survivors. When she learned about Rex, she fought hard to adopt him, convinced that his sharp mind and unbreakable loyalty still had value. And now, she was about to test that belief. Sarah Carter sat nervously in a chair, her fingers nervously clutching the fabric of her skirt. Emily stood behind her, peeking out from behind her mother's shoulder. Since the incident 2 weeks ago, Emily hadn't spoken a word. Though she had attended therapy, nothing had been able to coax her voice back. Laura knelt down to Emily's level, her voice soft and kind. "Hi, Emily. My name is Laura. I work with very special dogs. Dogs that help kids who've been through scary things." Emily didn't respond, her green eyes flickering briefly to the large German Shepherd just a few feet away. Rex sat motionless, his ears alert, but he made no move to approach. He simply watched, his presence steady, unthreatening. "Would you like to meet him?" Laura asked. Emily didn't answer, but she didn't run either. That, in itself, was progress. Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair and whispered, "He's a very nice dog, sweetheart. He used to be a police dog, just like the ones in your storybooks." Laura gave a quiet command to Rex. "Stay." The German Shepherd didn't move an inch. Laura turned back to Emily, her voice gentle. "You don't have to come close if you don't want to. Rex will wait right here, but if you feel ready, you can put out your hand, and he'll come to you." Emily hesitated, standing frozen for what felt like an eternity. Then, inch by inch, she stepped out from behind her mother. Her tiny hand rose, hesitant, but deliberate. Rex remained still, watching for the signal. When Laura nodded, he took a single, slow step forward. Then another, and another. The moment Rex's warm breath touched Emily's palm, something changed. Emily's fingers curled slightly, brushing through the dog's thick fur. The connection was made. Sarah gasped softly, pressing a hand to her mouth. It was the first time Emily had reached out to anything, anyone, since the attack. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Oh, baby." Emily's small fingers dug deeper into Rex's fur, gripping him as though he was the only solid thing left in a world that had become unrecognizable. Laura smiled. "That's a good girl, Emily. Rex likes you." The child said nothing, but she didn't let go. Over the next few weeks, Rex and Emily became inseparable. At home, she would sit beside him for hours, her tiny hands tracing the scar along his side. When nightmares woke her in the middle of the night, it was Rex's steady heartbeat that soothed her. Though she still refused to speak, she began drawing again. Simple crayon sketches of a girl and a dog standing strong together against shadowy figures. One afternoon, while sitting on the floor of Laura's office, Emily watched Rex perform a simple trick. Then, something remarkable happened. "Good boy," she whispered, the words so soft that for a moment Sarah thought she might have imagined them. But when she turned, she saw Emily staring at Rex, her lips slightly parted in surprise, as if she too had startled herself. Tears filled Sarah's eyes. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Laura placed a gentle hand on Sarah's arm. "She trusts him," she murmured. "Sometimes trust is the first step toward finding your voice again." Sarah squeezed her hand, her voice thick with emotion. "Then we'll follow wherever that trust leads." And it would lead them somewhere they never expected, to a courtroom where a monster would finally be unmasked. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension. The gallery was packed with journalists, families, and legal observers, all waiting with bated breath for one of the most high-profile trials in recent memory to begin. At the center of the room, the defendant, Richard Hale, sat calmly beside his attorney. His expression was unreadable, betraying none of the weight of the charges against him. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the polished wood of the defense table, betraying only a hint of restlessness. Seated beside her mother, Emily Carter clutched the leash of Rex tightly. Her small fingers curled around the thick fabric as if it were a lifeline. The German Shepherd sat alert beside her, his ears pricked forward, his deep brown eyes locked on Hale. Every so often, his nose would twitch, as though sensing something familiar in the air. "All rise," the bailiff's voice rang out, filling the room as Judge Mark Sullivan entered. His robe flowed behind him, and his sharp eyes scanned the room before briefly settling on Emily and Rex. He had already ruled in favor of allowing the therapy dog to be present, but he knew that decision had not been universally accepted. "Before we proceed with opening statements," Sullivan said in his deep, controlled voice, "the court will hear arguments regarding the presence of the support animal in these proceedings." Michael Graves, the defense attorney, rose smoothly from his seat, adjusting his tie as he did. "Your Honor," he began, his tone polite but firm, "while we understand the prosecution's argument for emotional support, the presence of this animal is highly prejudicial. A large German Shepherd in the courtroom could evoke an emotional response from the jury that might unfairly bias them against my client. We request that the dog be removed during testimony." Jenna Collins, the lead prosecutor, stood immediately in response, her voice calm but resolute. "Your Honor, Emily Carter is 5 years old and a trauma survivor. She has been diagnosed with selective mutism as a result of the trauma she endured. Rex is not here for spectacle. He is here as a medically necessary support animal. His presence allows Emily to participate in these proceedings without undue distress." Judge Sullivan leaned back in his chair, his face unreadable. "I have already reviewed the documentation submitted by the child psychologist and the animal behaviorist," he said quietly. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, some agreeing with the judge's decision, others grumbling under their breath. Graves pressed his lips together, clearly displeased but unwilling to push further. He returned to his seat, shooting a quick glance at Hale, who remained eerily expressionless. The trial began in earnest. The prosecution painted a chilling portrait of Hale's actions, a pattern of manipulation, deception, and predatory behavior spanning years. Witnesses were called, including Martha Jenkins, the elderly neighbor who had seen Hale attempt to lure Emily into his van. Her voice trembled as she described how Hale had grabbed Emily's arm before fleeing when confronted. Throughout it all, Emily sat silently, her small frame dwarfed by the large wooden chair. Her fingers occasionally flexed around the leash, but she never let go. Whenever the tension became too much, she would glance down at Rex, who remained perfectly still, his quiet presence grounding her. Then, it was time for her testimony. A hush fell over the courtroom as Emily was gently led to the witness stand. Sarah walked beside her, her protective gaze never leaving her daughter. She helped Emily into the chair before stepping away, her heart in her throat, desperate to pull her daughter from this place. Jenna Collins approached carefully, her demeanor soft and welcoming. "Hi, Emily," she said with a gentle smile. "I know this is a little scary, but remember, you don't have to say anything you don't want to. You can just nod or shake your head if you feel more comfortable, and if you ever need a break, you can let us know." Emily didn't look at her. Her gaze was fixed on the table in front of her, her breathing shallow and rapid. But then, sensing her discomfort, Rex leaned his body lightly against her leg. Emily reached down, her small hand gripping a handful of his fur. Slowly, she nodded. "Good," Jenna said, her voice soothing. "Emily, can you tell us who was with you in your yard that day?" Emily hesitated, her gaze still lowered. But after a long moment, she slowly raised her arm and pointed directly at Richard Hale. The defendant's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, an involuntary tightening of his jaw. Graves was on his feet instantly. Objection. The child has been repeatedly shown images of my client prior to trial. This identification is unreliable. Judge Sullivan raised a hand, his expression firm. Overruled. The jury will determine the credibility of the witness. Jenna continued, her voice soft but unyielding. Emily, did this man say anything to you that day? The child didn't speak. Instead, she made a small, subtle gesture with her hand, a signal Rex had come to understand. In an instant, the German shepherd's ears snapped forward, his body tensed, and a low, guttural growl rumbled from his chest. It wasn't an aggressive sound, but a warning. The reaction sent a shockwave through the courtroom. Even Judge Sullivan leaned forward, his brow furrowed in surprise. Graves stood again, this time with more urgency in his voice. Your Honor, I object. This is... But Sullivan wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on Rex, who had gone utterly still, his gaze locked on Hale as if he recognized something only he could perceive. It was the same reaction Rex had exhibited when Emily had first encountered Hale, the same instinctual response. A thought struck Judge Sullivan. He turned to Jenna. Miss Collins, he said, his voice measured. Has this animal had any prior interaction with the defendant? Jenna hesitated. Not to my knowledge, Your Honor. Sullivan's gaze shifted to the defense table. Mr. Hale, have you encountered this dog before? For the first time, Hale showed real emotion. His fingers, which had been tapping the table so calmly before, clenched into a fist. He remained silent. Jenna's eyes widened as a sudden realization dawned on her. She turned to her co-counsel and whispered something urgently. A moment later, a member of the prosecution team rushed out of the courtroom. What is going on? Graves demanded, his patience wearing thin. Jenna straightened, her expression unreadable. Your Honor, I request a short recess. There may be new evidence relevant to this case. Judge Sullivan studied her for a long moment before nodding. 15-minute recess. As the courtroom emptied, whispers filled the air, speculation spreading like wildfire. Had Rex just recognized Richard Hale? And if so, from where? Something inside Judge Sullivan told him that the answer to that question would change everything. The weight of the case pressed down on the prosecution team as new developments emerged. Richard Hale had been officially linked to multiple disappearances. Yet, without Emily's full testimony, the trial hung precariously in the balance. What no one anticipated, however, was that the key to unraveling the case wouldn't come from the child, but from the German shepherd who had never left her side. The morning air was crisp as the prosecution, led by Jenna Collins, presented their next motion to introduce new forensic evidence. The soil samples found in Richard Hale's van had been analyzed, and the results pointed to a very specific location: a remote, unoccupied cabin in the northern woods. Detective Jack Monroe, with decades of experience in similar cases, recognized the significance immediately. Your Honor, Collins addressed Judge Sullivan, we request a 24-hour recess to follow up on a crucial lead. We believe this evidence may provide the final piece needed to close this case. Michael Graves, Hale's defense attorney, stood immediately, objecting. Your Honor, this is nothing more than a delay tactic. My client has already been through extensive questioning, and there's no solid evidence linking him to this so-called cabin. These soil samples are circumstantial at best. Judge Sullivan's stern gaze silenced Graves. Motion granted, he ruled. The prosecution has 24 hours. The court adjourned. As soon as the gavel struck, Monroe and his team sprang into action. Rex, Emily's ever-watchful protector, was brought along for the operation. His reaction to Hale had been unmistakable. Perhaps he sensed something that had eluded the human eye. By early afternoon, the search team arrived at the desolate cabin. The place was eerily silent, the trees surrounding it whispering in the wind. A thick layer of dust covered the porch, but faint footprints leading toward the back door suggested recent activity. Rex was the first to react. As soon as they approached, his ears perked, his nose twitched with keen intensity. His body stiffened, tail erect, muscles taut like a coiled spring. A low growl rumbled from his chest, and he began pacing anxiously at the threshold. "This place feels wrong," Monroe murmured. "Rex knows something's here." The team proceeded cautiously, weapons drawn. Inside, the cabin was sparse. A table, a cot, empty cans stacked in a corner. But then Monroe's eyes caught something peculiar. The wooden floor near the back wall had an unnatural seam, a faint indentation that didn't belong. He knocked on it. Hollow. "There's something under here," he said, voice low and urgent. The officers pried the boards loose. What lay beneath sent a chill down their spines, a narrow staircase spiraling down into a hidden basement. The air grew cold and damp as they descended. In the dim light, they saw a horrific sight: children's belongings scattered around, old toys, small shoes, a faded pink backpack. And in the farthest corner, chained but still alive, was a little girl, Emma Sullivan. Emma, the 8-year-old missing for 6 months, looked pale and ragged. But as soon as she saw the officers, her eyes filled with tears of recognition and relief. "Help!" she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. Rex reacted instantly, straining against his leash, whining as if sensing the pain Emma had endured. Monroe rushed forward, unlocking the chains and scooping Emma into his arms. "You're safe now," he reassured her. "We've got you." Emma clung to him, trembling, and the search finally came to an end. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. Back at the courthouse, the news of Emma's rescue spread like wildfire. The gallery was packed as Collins prepared for the final strike against Hale. Judge Sullivan allowed Emma's discovery to be introduced as evidence, along with the soil sample linking the cabin to Hale's vehicle. "Mr. Hale," Collins said, her voice sharp as steel, "how do you explain the presence of an abducted child locked in a basement on a property directly tied to you?" For the first time, Richard Hale looked shaken. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. Jenna pressed forward, her tone unwavering. "Your DNA was found on the chains. Your vehicle's tires match the tracks outside the cabin. And more importantly, Emma Sullivan is alive, meaning she can testify against you." The weight of her words settled heavily over the courtroom. A single survivor, one who could single-handedly dismantle his defense. Hale's carefully constructed composure began to crack. His lawyer whispered furiously in his ear, but it was clear. He was cornered. And then it happened again. Rex, lying at Emily's feet, suddenly lifted his head. His eyes narrowed at Hale. His hackles rose. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from his chest. The room went silent as the German shepherd took slow, deliberate steps forward. His gaze locked onto the defendant. It was unmistakable. Recognition. Hale flinched. Everyone saw it. The man who had maintained his arrogance throughout the trial was now visibly sweating, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He turned to his attorney, muttering something frantically. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Hale said, "I want to change my plea." Gasps erupted from the courtroom. Judge Sullivan's eyes darkened. "Mr. Hale, are you stating that you wish to plead guilty?" The room held its collective breath. Hale exhaled shakily. "Yes." The trial's sudden end sent shockwaves through the nation. Richard Hale was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His conviction sealed the fate of a man who had terrorized families for years. But the true heroes of the case weren't just the lawyers or the detectives. They were a 5-year-old girl who had found her courage and a dog who had never given up on her. In the days following the sentencing, Emily spoke her first words in weeks. Holding Rex's face in her small hands, she whispered, "Thank you." Her parents wept, knowing their daughter was finally finding her way back to them. And as Rex wagged his tail, nuzzling her gently, it was clear, some bonds are unbreakable. No matter how dark the world becomes, there will always be those willing to stand against the darkness, even if they walk on 4 legs. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories of resilience and hope, and don't forget to share this video with friends and family. Your support helps us continue this vital work, one life at a time. Let's keep the flame of compassion burning brightly, because together we can make miracles happen. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.